The hands are shaking as they pray. It's not a shiver from the cold. It's a tremor coming from the inside. From deep inside, a place where a mother keeps her last few coins of hope. Elena holds tight to a small bluish fossil, shaped like a petrified shell, smooth and ancient like a truth nobody believes in anymore. Her eyes are closed. Her lips move without sound. Please let him hear. The plea is almost inaudible. It's the kind of prayer people make when they've prayed so many times that the words have lost their original meaning and become just ritual, just desperation in the form of sound. Elena is 45. That's 45 years on a face that was once beautiful, but life decided to make less beautiful with every passing season. There are exhaustion lines around her eyes. There are gray strands. She doesn't die because there's no money for the salon. There are the hands of a woman who works. Hands that clean, that cook, that raise a son alone. She is kneeling in Leo's dark bedroom. Her son sleeps in a simple twin bed. The room is small. So small you can touch two walls at the same time. The walls have water stains that look like continents on a map of a place nobody wants to live. Leo is 10. He has a peaceful face when he sleeps, as if in slumber he can finally turn off the silence that surrounds him during the day. Leo is deaf. It's a kind of deafness that came later. A fever when he was 4. A fever so high his body decided to defend itself by destroying a piece of itself. It destroyed the parts that processed sound, left intact the parts that processed everything else. Leo is a child living in a world that doesn't hear him, and Elena spends every day trying to find a way to make him hear. Elena presses the fossil against her chest. She feels its ancient shape against her clothes. It's a shape she knows well, a shape she's carried for years. She found the fossil on the beach years ago, before Leo went deaf, before her life turned into this small, desperate existence. She kept it because it was beautiful, kept it because it was old, kept it because it was the only thing she could call hers. The bedroom door opens silently, so much silence that there isn't even a sound to break. The man who enters is Vincent. He's 50, the kind of 50 that comes accompanied by money. A perfect suit at 11 at night, Italian loafers, a watch that costs more than Elena's entire life. His skin has the artificial glow of someone who spends more time in country clubs than outdoors. His face is that of someone who never hears the word no. Vincent watches Elena kneeling. Watch the way his eyes move. First ignorance, as if he doesn't understand what he's seeing. Then curiosity. Then disdain. A woman praying in his house, in the servants' quarters. A maid, an intruder in a space that technically belongs to him. He takes a step forward. The floorboard creaks. Elena spins around with a start that is almost violent. Her whole body responds as if she'd been electrocuted. Her eyes go wide. Her breath freezes, and in an instinctive movement, she closes her hand over the fossil, squeezes it as if someone were going to rip it from her grip. What is that stone, Elena? Vincent's voice is very calm. It's the voice of someone used to asking questions that are actually accusations. Someone used to people answering in a state of total alert. Are you stealing my antiques? Elena thinks fast, thinks about lying, thinks about explaining, thinks about everything that could go wrong in this moment. And then she breathes, just breathes, and opens her hand. Her arm extends toward Vincent. The bluish fossil rests in her palm like a tiny treasure. It's not a stone, Mr. Sterling. It's an otolith, from your grandfather. Vincent freezes. There is a silence so deep you can hear both of them breathing. You can hear the sound of the ocean at the bottom of the estate. You can hear everything except an answer from Vincent. His eyes study the object in Elena's hand as if he were seeing a ghost. Do you know what an otolith is? Asks Elena, her voice trembling ever so slightly. A small crystal, from the master's grandfather. A small crystal from your grandfather. The seaside mansion is too big for the people living in it. Vincent inherited it 2 years ago when his grandfather died. Along with the mansion came everything else. Came an entire library of field journals. Came a collection of minerals and fossils occupying half the first floor. Came the history of a man who had dedicated his life to studying the earth in a way few can understand. Vincent's grandfather was a geologist, one of those guys who explores caves, who climbs mountains, who looks at rocks and sees stories, who looks at fossils and sees lives that ended millions of years ago. Vincent's grandfather was all that. Vincent, no. Vincent is just someone who inherited those things and sees in them only investment. He spends his days on phone calls with buyers. with appraisers, with people who come to the mansion and put numbers on things that shouldn't have a price. He is a man living in a mansion he doesn't love, surrounded by things he doesn't understand, because all he understands is profit. But there is a feeling when he looks at a fossil. There is a feeling he doesn't like to feel. It's a feeling that looks like loss. "How long have you worked for me, Elena?" asked Vincent, and there is something in his voice that is different. Something less accusation and more genuine interrogation. 23 years, Mr. Sterling. All these years, you cleaned this house, you cooked, you took care of your son in the back room. And you stole a fossil from my grandfather? It wasn't theft, sir. I found it on the beach before I came to work here, before I met you. Vincent takes the fossil from Elena's hand, touches it, feels the shape of it against his skin, feels the mineral coldness, feels the age. Your grandfather left many things here, sir, Elena continues. Journals, notes, studies, all about minerals, about fossils, about things he found. Vincent opens his hand and looks at the fossil. "Do you know what this is, really?" he asks. "Do you actually know?" "No, sir, I just believed it might be important." He looks down from his hand to the fossil, closes his hand over it again. "Tomorrow I'm selling all of this, Elena. The collection, the journals, everything. A Brazilian buyer has already made an offer. I'm going to sign the papers. Your life here won't change. You keep working, clean the house, cook, take care of your son. Same as always. Just without a dead man's old things lying around." He turns to leave. "And Elena, one thing. I don't want to find you in my quarters at night anymore. Praying or not praying. Next time you leave this mansion. You and your son, understood?" "Yes, Mr. Sterling. Understood." But he doesn't give the fossil back. He holds it as he walks out, and Elena stays there, on her knees, with her hand open. The hand that holds nothing anymore, prays with nothing anymore. In the days that follow, Vincent keeps his promise. A man comes to the mansion. It's the kind of man who appraises things, who asks questions about provenance, who takes pictures with an expensive camera, who writes numbers in a leather notebook. Elena watches him while she works, watches the collection Vincent is selling, watches as he touches things Vincent's grandfather touched, touches things Vincent's grandfather maybe loved. The collection occupies a whole room, a room with shelves and glass cases, a room that is a museum of a man who believed in things, a geologist who believed minerals had stories, that fossils had meaning, that the world beneath our feet was as important as the world above. There are thousands of items in this collection, and there are, in a drawer, the field journals of Vincent's grandfather. Vincent orders Elena to clean the collection, prepare everything for the sale. She goes in with rags and care, with the care of someone who knows she is touching valuable things, with the care of someone who knows she is touching memories. While she cleans, she opens the journals. The journals are filled with handwriting, with drawings, with notes from a lifetime dedicated to observing rocks. There are drawings of fossils. There are calculations. There are words in several languages. There are dates going back 50 years. And on one page, among many pages, there is a drawing. The drawing is meticulous, detailed like only a scientist can do. And the drawing is of an otolith, a spiral shape, a shape Elena recognizes immediately. It is exactly like the fossil she found on the beach. It is exactly like the fossil Vincent took from her hands. Next to the drawing, there is a note written in an old script. Otolith of Calcareous Augustidens, unique piezoelectric properties, pure vibration. Hearing study, piezoelectric, hearing. Elena reads the phrase 3 times, 4 times. She doesn't fully understand what those words mean. But she understands enough, understands that Vincent's grandfather was studying something related to hearing, understands that he was studying that specific fossil for some reason, understands that maybe that man knew something. She rips the page out of the journal, puts it in her pocket. The risk she is taking is enormous, destroying Vincent's property, damaging a valuable journal, stealing a page. All of these are things that get her kicked out of the mansion, that put her on the street, that leave Leo without a place to sleep. But there is something stronger than fear. There is hope. There is the microscopic possibility that maybe, just maybe, someone discovered something a long time ago. Something that could help Leo. Something written on a page of old paper from a dead geologist. Elena works through the hours that follow with shaking hands, cleans the collection, packs everything into the boxes for the sale, works with the stolen page in her pocket, touching it periodically as if to confirm it is still there, that it still exists. At night, when Leo sleeps, Elena goes out. She walks along the beach where she found the fossil years ago. The beach is cold. It is deserted. It's the kind of place that exists mainly so people like Elena can come cry where no one can hear them. She takes the page out of her pocket, reads Vincent's grandfather's note again. Piezoelectric. Hearing. She doesn't know what piezoelectric means, but she knows it means something, knows it is important, knows a man dedicated his life to understanding this thing. She puts the page back in her pocket, and she goes back to the mansion. Over the next few days, Elena researches. She uses the staff computer in the kitchen. It's an old desktop Vincent leaves there to communicate with buyers. Elena, during the hours Vincent isn't home, logs on and types. Types the word piezoelectricity and discovers. Piezoelectricity is the ability of some materials to generate an electric charge when subjected to mechanical stress. It is a property of certain crystals. It is a property found naturally. It is a property that, when applied correctly, could theoretically be used to stimulate auditory cells. An otolith fossil is a calcium carbonate crystal. It is exactly the type of material that could have piezoelectric properties. It is exactly the type of material a geologist would study if he were trying to find a natural way to stimulate hearing. Elena feels something inside her that isn't quite hope. It is something stronger. It is the feeling that maybe she isn't crazy. Maybe Vincent's grandfather really discovered something. She takes the stolen page and leaves the mansion. She walks through the city until she reaches an old university. A university that has a geology department. A university that would have professors who understand piezoelectricity and fossils. She looks for a professor. Finds an old man. A retired professor who still stops by the university occasionally to access the library. A man who is exactly the kind of person who would understand what Vincent's grandfather was studying. She shows the page. The professor reads it. His eyes move slowly over the writing, over the drawing, over the note. When he finishes, he looks at Elena. "Where did you find this?" he asks. "Where did you get this?" "It's from a private collection," answers Elena. "From a geologist who passed away." "This geologist," says the professor slowly, holding the page as if holding gold. "Did he have a name?" "Arthur Sterling," answers Elena. "He worked with minerals and fossils, studied their composition." The professor sits down. It's as if he simply decided his legs couldn't hold him up anymore. "Do you know who Arthur Sterling was?" he asks. "Do you know the work he did?" "I don't, but I think it had to do with hearing, with deafness maybe." The professor holds the page like a relic. "Arthur Sterling," he says, "was a pioneer. He was a man who theorized that certain fossils, certain forms of ancient crystals, could be adapted for use in natural cochlear implants. He thought that, instead of using electronic technology, you could use nature. Use natural properties of ancient materials to restore hearing." The professor looks at Elena. It was his theory. It was never proven. He died without seeing his work concluded. And now here, I have this page. This page suggests he was very close to something. Elena feels something inside her. Feels as if the ground beneath her is moving. What does she do now? She has a stolen page from a dead man's journal. Has a theory that was never proven. Has a fossil that Vincent took from her hands. Has a deaf son sleeping in a small, damp room. And she has the feeling that maybe, just maybe, a widowed mother found something that could change everything. But to do that, she needs things she doesn't have. Needs access to the rest of the journals. Needs access to the fossil Vincent is holding. Needs access to a man dead for a long time. And needs the courage to ask for all of this from a man who would put her on the street without blinking if he knew what she is planning. Elena waits for the right moment. Waits for an afternoon when Vincent is in the study, talking on the phone with the buyer. Waits for when the house is empty enough that she can walk without being seen. Waits for when the risk is calculated, but still a risk. She enters the room where the collection is being prepped for sale. The boxes are stacked. The journals have been separated into a special crate. The fossil, the bluish fossil, is in a glass case on Vincent's desk. It is there as if it were in a museum. As if it belonged to no one but the money it represents. Elena takes the journal she stole the page from, takes the fossil, holds both as if holding a truth that can free her son. She walks into the study. Vincent is on the phone. He is negotiating price, is talking about authenticity, is explaining to someone on the other end of the line that the collection is valuable, that the geologist was famous, that the fossils are rare. He sees Elena enter. His face changes from that businessman expression to the expression of a man whose privacy is being invaded. Wait for him to finish the call. He hangs up the phone without saying goodbye to the buyer. Just hits the button. Just disconnects the person on the other end like they didn't matter. "What are you doing, Elena?" he asks, and there is something in his voice that is more dangerous than anger. There is something that is pure calculation. "I need to show you something, Mr. Sterling," answers Elena. "I need you to understand." She places the journal and the fossil on the desk between her and Vincent. "Your grandfather was studying this. He was studying otolith fossils, was researching piezoelectricity. His theory was that these fossils could be used to restore hearing." She breathes. "My son is deaf, Mr. Sterling. He is deaf because a fever destroyed the parts of him that processed sound. And your grandfather left here, in this house, the answers to help him." Vincent watches her as if she had started speaking a foreign language he can't understand. "What exactly are you talking about, Elena?" he asks slowly. "Are you asking me to believe that a fossil can cure deafness? That my grandfather's notes, which died with him, suddenly have medical value?" "Yes, sir. I am saying your grandfather discovered something, that he theorized something that could change everything." Vincent laughs. It is a laugh that is almost gentle. It is the kind of laugh of a man who found something so absurd he can't even get angry. It's just amusement. "Elena, you've worked here for 23 years. You cook, you clean, you are a dedicated woman. But you are not a scientist. And what you are suggesting is science fiction. It's madness." He picks up the journal, examines it as if seeing it for the first time. "My grandfather was a dreamer," Vincent continues. "He was a man who looked at rocks and saw magic in them. He was a man who spent his whole life hunting fossils and theorizing things that were never proven. And when he died, he left a house full of ruin and a lifetime of theory with no practical application." Vincent puts the journal in a box. "I will not allow a theory of my grandfather to destroy the opportunity I have here. This collection is worth $4 million to a serious buyer. $4 million that will give me a life he never had. A real life. Of business. Of reality." He picks up the bluish fossil. "And this little crystal isn't a key to medicine. It's an investment that might become a pretty paperweight in a collector's living room." Elena feels something inside her. Feels as if she is watching Leo's destruction live. As if she is seeing hope being put in a box and sealed. "Please, Mr. Sterling, please leave the fossil with me. Leave the journals. Let me investigate. Let me try." Elena's voice is almost a whisper. It is a voice that has already given up. That is just begging for crumbs. Vincent puts the fossil in the box, closes it. "Elena, you're fired." The silence that follows is so deep it feels like it sucked all the air out of the room. "You stole a page from a valuable document. You entered my study without permission. You confronted me with pseudoscience. All of this is insubordination. It is theft. It is a violation of trust." He taps the box containing the fossil. "You have until tomorrow to get out of the house. You and your son. The back room isn't yours anymore. Find another place, find another job. But you are no longer welcome here." Elena opens her mouth to speak. "There is nothing to say, Elena. Nothing. You are fired. And if you tell anyone about my grandfather or this crazy theory, I will sue you for theft. I will sue you for defamation. I will ensure you never get a job in this town again." Elena stands up, walks to the door. Before leaving, she takes the stolen page out of her pocket, places it on the desk. "Do you want me to return this too, sir?" Vincent takes the page, studies it. "Yes. Everything that is mine stays here. Everything that is yours leaves here tomorrow." He tears the page and throws it in the wastebasket. Elena watches as those ancient words, that writing of Vincent's grandfather, that theory that could change everything, is reduced to scraps in a trash can next to a glass and steel desk. The night that follows is a night of packing. Elena and Leo put their lives into suitcases. It isn't hard because their lives occupy very little space. 2 suitcases, a small bag, some clothes, some personal items, a life that fits in a car borrowed from a friend. The back room, which was home for 23 years, becomes empty. The walls that had their posters, their photos, their drawings, go back to being white and blank. As if Elena had never lived there. As if she were just a ghost passing through. Leo sleeps during the packing. He doesn't understand what is happening. Understands only that his mother is taking his things, that his bed is being unmade, that the only home he knows is being erased. In the morning before leaving, Elena looks out the window, sees something that makes her heart stop. A car has parked in front of the mansion, a big vehicle, a truck with the logo of a logistics company. Men are getting out of the truck. Men wearing work uniforms, men carrying crates. They are taking the collection. They are taking Vincent's grandfather's years of research, are taking the history, are taking the answers. And among the boxes, Elena can see a small wooden crate. Dark wood, old wood, valuable wood. That is the box containing the bluish fossil. That is the box containing Leo's hope. The men carry it with care, because it is a valuable collection, because it represents money, because it represents investment. They put it in the cargo bay of the truck, and it is in that instant that Elena feels something light up inside her. It is an idea so desperate it is almost madness. It is a plan that requires a kind of courage Elena never believed she had. It is an idea that would leave her even more homeless, even more desperate, even further from any rational hope. But it is the only idea she has. She puts her hand on Leo's shoulder as they watch the truck start to move, as they watch the collection being taken away, as they watch the boy's future being packed and transported to a buyer in an unknown place. She whispers something to Leo, something he can't hear, but that she feels is important to say anyway. "Let's go after it," whispers Elena. "Let's find it. No matter the cost, no matter the risk. Let's find your way back to us." Leo looks at his mother. His eyes can't process the words he can't hear, but they can process the desperation, can process the determination, can process a mother who just decided she is going to risk everything. Elena carries the suitcases to the borrowed car, puts Leo in the back seat, and without warning anyone, without saying goodbye, without leaving anything but an empty room and a house that will keep existing, as if she had never been there, she leaves the mansion, follows the truck, follows the men carrying the collection, follows the wooden box containing the fossil that could be her son's salvation, follows as a mother can only follow, with anger, with desperation, with a determination that is almost feral. The truck moves through the city, passes streets Elena knows, passes streets she doesn't know, passes a port that sits on the edge of the bay, and stops at a warehouse, a large warehouse bearing the symbol of an export company. A warehouse that is obviously a place where things are prepared to travel, to leave the country, to disappear on ships crossing oceans. The men unload the truck, take all the boxes inside the warehouse. Elena stays in the car, watches as the collection is taken, watches as Vincent's grandfather is transported to a place she will never be able to reach, watches as the wooden box disappears inside the warehouse. And she understands that she lost, that now the collection is in a place she cannot access, that the box will be crated, will be loaded onto a ship, will be sent overseas, will be deposited in a private room of a collector who will never know that inside that box exists the possibility of curing deafness. It is sickening to watch a mother lose the opportunity to help her son because of a man's greed, isn't it? To see hope destroyed by those who have power and don't understand the weight of what they possess. If you also believe that a woman like Elena, a woman risking everything for the love of her son, deserved a chance, hit that like button right now to support all the mothers fighting alone against the world's disbelief. Elena parks the car far away, puts her head in her hands, and cries in a way that is almost silent, in a way that doesn't want to wake Leo, in a way that is just pure despair, formless, hopeless. Leo, in the back seat, watches his mother, and although he cannot hear her sobs, he can see them, can see her body moving, can see a mother breaking in half because of a son who cannot hear. He puts his hand on her shoulder and touches, just touches, just applies pressure to her shoulder as if he could transfer strength through that touch, as if he could communicate something he cannot speak, as if he could say, "It's okay, Mom, it's okay." But he doesn't believe it's okay. And Elena doesn't believe it's okay. Everything is wrong. Everything is lost. Everything is distant now. The wooden box containing the bluish fossil is going to a port, is going to a ship, is going to an ocean, is going to a private collector in a country Elena can't even look up on a map. And with it, goes hope. Goes Leo's last chance to hear again. Goes the theory of a man who died without seeing his work proven. Goes everything that could have been. Elena sits in the car, and she waits. Waits for an idea. Waits for an opportunity. Waits for something indicating there is still a chance. But there is only silence. The silence that circles her son. The silence that circles the disappearing collection. The silence that circles a life that knew how it should be, and is now just empty. The warehouse is too big for a small heart. Elena sits on a bench outside, waiting. Waiting for what? She doesn't know anymore. Leo is sleeping with his head against her leg. The suitcase next to them contains everything they own in the world. She is waiting for a miracle, or an opportunity, or anything that isn't the pure despair consuming her. The wooden box is still in the warehouse. The collection is still being cataloged. There is a window of time, maybe 3 days, before the ship leaves. 3 days to do something. Anything. On the night of the second day, Elena comes up with a plan so desperate she almost laughs thinking about it. A plan that requires entering the warehouse. That requires fooling security. That requires sheer luck, and a heart willing to beat so fast it feels like it'll explode. She wants Leo to stay in a cheap motel she paid for with her last bit of money. She leaves the boy with a woman who works there, a woman who watches kids occasionally, a woman who, when Elena explains with only the necessary truth that she needs to recover something, understands without asking more questions. Elena enters the warehouse, enters wearing a uniform she stole from an employee about her size, enters with a fake badge she made at a friend's house who prints these things for undocumented folks, enters as if she belonged there. The warehouse at night is a different place. It is a place where boxes cast shadows, where sounds echo, where a woman alone can seem very alone. She looks for the wooden box, looks among the crates being prepped for export, looks with shaking hands, looks knowing that at any moment someone could walk in and discover she doesn't work there. Finds the box. It's marked with symbols indicating it's a valuable collection. It's wrapped in protective plastic. It is, for all intents and purposes, property in transition. Elena pulls the box from the stack. It is heavy, but not as heavy as the fear Elena feels. It is big, but not as big as the determination moving her. She walks toward the exit. It is in that instant that a hand grabs her arm. A big hand. A hand belonging to a big man. A man wearing a security uniform and a real badge. A man whose job is exactly to stop women like Elena from stealing things like the box she is holding. "Where are you going with that?" asks the guard. Elena feels her heart drop. Feels like she's on a plane that lost an engine. Feels like everything she planned, everything she risked, everything she left behind just vanished in a second. "For verification," answers Elena, and her voice is surprisingly calm given she is lying and being caught while lying. The guard examines her badge, examines her face, examines the box she is holding. "You don't work here," he says with the certainty of someone who knows everyone who works there. He takes the box from her hands. He holds it as if holding gold. Because it is gold. Because it is Vincent's future. Because it is the money Vincent will use to buy a yacht. "You need to come with me," says the guard. He takes her back inside the warehouse, takes her toward a supervision office, takes her like a soldier takes a prisoner of war. The warehouse manager makes a call to Vincent. A call saying a woman tried to steal from the collection being exported. A call saying she is there now, waiting for instructions on what to do with her. Vincent arrives at the warehouse 20 minutes later. Arrives in his expensive car. Arrives like a man interrupted from something important. Arrives with a fury that is quiet and calculated. Elena is sitting on a chair in the supervision office. The guard stands next to her, as if she were liable to explode at any moment. "Elena," says Vincent, and his voice is that of a teacher talking to a student who disappointed him. "You stole from me. You were fired. You lost the right to be near my possessions. And yet here you are trying to seize property that is being shipped overseas." He walks around her. "You know I can call the police, right? You know theft is a crime? That you can go to prison?" "Please, Mr. Sterling," whispers Elena. "For the love of God, it's for my son. It's just a fossil. A small bluish fossil that means nothing to you." "It does mean something," answers Vincent. "It means money. It means my future. It means the life I'll be able to live." He leans in close to Elena. You are a desperate mother making up stories, Elena. Stories about fossils that cure deafness. Stories about my grandfather's theories that were never proven. Stories helping you justify that you are here, that you are stealing from me, that you are risking freedom for your son. He stands up. The story is pretty, but it is just a story. And I don't sell stories. I sell facts. I sell value. I sell money. The guard pulls her to her feet. You are leaving here now. If I see you near this warehouse again, if I hear you are trying to get close to the collection again, I will call the police. I will report you for trespassing, for theft, for breaking and entering. I will ensure you never get a job in this city again. Vincent points her to the exit. And as for your son, Elena, well, that is your problem, not mine. The days that follow are days of nothing. Elena and Leo live in a motel room that is falling apart, live on money that is running out, live with a hope that is definitely dead. There is no mirage of recovery, no idea how to get the fossil back, no path forward that isn't complete defeat. Elena spends the days looking for work, can't find anything, because Vincent kept his threat, because he called employers, because every time a possibility appears, he appears too, whispering that she is a woman who cannot be trusted. The night before the ship leaves, there is a final meeting between Vincent and the foreign buyer. A meeting in a private office where no outsider is watching. The foreign buyer is a man who looks nothing like what you'd expect from a collector. He is young, has that look of someone who spent a lot of time with scientific equipment, has the kind of enthusiasm made of someone who knows exactly what he is looking for. He takes out the wooden box, opens the box, and examines the fossil with a portable device. A device that measures mineral properties. A device that detects piezoelectricity. A device a man collecting for the wrong reasons would never think to use. The buyer goes silent while he examines. His face changes. Changes from curiosity to admiration. Changes from admiration to something that is almost ecstasy. Do you know what you have here? He asks Vincent. I know it's a rare fossil, answers Vincent. I know it's from a valuable collection. No, says the buyer. It's not just rare. This is exceptionally rare. This is an otolith of Carcharias augustidens, with piezoelectric properties of a quality I have never seen in a fossil specimen before. He examines the object with the reverence of someone touching something sacred. Do you understand what this means? Asks the buyer. Do you understand the market that exists for something like this? No, admits Vincent, and there is something in his voice that is pure greed. Something that is the sinking feeling he is leaving money on the table. It means research, says the buyer. It means telecommunications. It means materials for the next generation of transmission technology. It means universities competing to study this. It means tech companies paying millions just to understand how this crystal works. The buyer places the fossil carefully back in the box. You are selling this for very little, Vincent. The collection is valued at 4 million. But this fossil alone could be worth 20, 30, maybe more. Vincent feels the floor move. Feels as if he let a fortune slip away. Feels as if he was tricked. Feels as if someone knew something he didn't know. But there is a solution. There is a way to fix this. There is a way not to sell to the buyer. There is a way to keep the fossil. There is a way to sell to the real interested parties, the parties who will pay the millions of dollars the fossil is truly worth. I'll double the offer, says Vincent to the buyer. I'll pay you double to cancel the purchase. The buyer laughs. No, he answers. I bought it, I pay, I keep the fossil, and I'm going to sell it to a tech lab that will pay much more than you can offer. Vincent watches the buyer put the box back in his briefcase, watches as he walks toward the door, watches as the thing that could have been his infinite wealth disappears through his hands. It is in that instant that Vincent understands something. Understands that a fossil isn't just a stone. Understands that a fossil has value. Understands that his grandfather knew something he didn't know. Understands that maybe his grandfather was right, but understands all this too late. Too late because the box is already leaving. Too late because the ship is already ready. Too late because the fossil is going to be taken to a place he cannot access. Too late because he chose greed when he could have chosen knowledge. There is one last attempt by Elena. An attempt that is almost pathetic in its desperation. An attempt made because she has nothing left to lose. Elena goes to Vincent's office, enters without being invited. She is a woman who once worked there, who cooked for that house, who raised a son in the back of that property, who cannot be completely denied entry. Vincent sees her enter. His face changes to anger. "How did you get in here?" he asks. Elena walks toward him, and when she gets close enough, she kneels on the floor of his office, with hands clasped, begging, "Please, Mr. Sterling, please, I don't want money, I don't want any of it. I just want the scientists to test it. Let doctors try. For my son. Let someone try to restore his hearing. Let your grandfather's theory be tested, please." Her voice is broken, is literally shattering while she speaks. Vincent watches her kneeling. There is a moment where you can see in his eyes that he is considering, that he is thinking, that he is understanding that maybe the desperate mother is right. But it is just a moment, because then the greed returns, because then he remembers the fossil is worth millions, because then he remembers he can have a yacht, because then he remembers money is more important than theory. That money is more important than a son. That money is the answer to everything. "Get out of here," he says to Elena. "The stone is going to fund my new yacht. Your son's deafness is your problem, not mine." Elena stands up, walks toward the door, and when she reaches the door, she hears Vincent calling the port operator. Hears him say he wants to confirm the ship is ready to leave. Hears him say he wants to ensure the collection is boarded. Hears him finalize a deal that is destroying a life. Elena leaves the office, walks through the city streets, walks like a ghost, just going through the motions of a life that already ended. The next day, she and Leo go to the port. They go because there is nothing else to do. Go because they want to see. Go because they need to confirm that everything is gone. They watch as the collection is loaded onto the ship. Watch as the wooden box disappears into the depths of a freighter that will sail to a place they can't even imagine. Watch as a private jet takes off with a foreign buyer. Watch as everything that could have saved Leo disappears. And it is in that moment that Elena's phone rings. It's a call. It's the retired professor. And he is very excited. "Elena," he shouts into the phone, his voice breaking with excitement. "Elena, I found something. I found an incomplete digital copy of the journal. Not all pages were scanned, but the ones that were." "Elena," he didn't just theorize. There is a pause. "He tested it. Your grandfather." "No. Vincent's grandfather. The geologist. He tested it on a child. There is a medical report here. An old document. A document showing he extracted a similar fossil and implanted it in a deaf child, and the child regained hearing." The professor continues. "Do you understand what this means? Do you understand he didn't just believe it worked? He knew. He had already proven it. There is a digital copy of a scientific report that is 30 years ahead of its time. A report an obscure collector is about to discover when he receives the full collection. Elena, a telecommunications collector, is going to discover he has scientific proof of how to restore hearing using a natural material. And when he discovers it, he'll want more precious properties. He'll want more complete fossils. He'll want the best specimen." The professor pauses. "He'll want the bluish fossil you left with me. Or rather, the one Vincent took back. The digital report arrives by email. It is a PDF file. It is a scanned image of a document that is 66 years old. It is a handwritten page with penmanship that is precise and scientific. It is a document that shouldn't exist. It is a document kept hidden in a drawer by a man who died without telling the truth to anyone." Elena prints the document at a copy shop, holds the printed page as if holding something resurrected from dust. The header reads, "Preliminary Report, Natural Cochlear Implant, 1958. And the content changes everything. The report begins by explaining that Vincent's grandfather, the geologist Arthur Sterling, had extracted a special otolith fossil from a limestone mine in the south, had processed the fossil into a fine powder, had created an innovative structure based on the natural structure of the crystal, and had implanted this device in the inner ear of a child. An 8-year-old child. A child who had been deaf since birth. A child who was the son of Mary, the cook at Arthur Sterling's estate. The documented results were extraordinary. In the first month, the child began responding to sounds. In the third month, could identify voices. In the 6th month, could converse in a basic way. The implant had worked. The theory had been proven. The technology was a success. But there was a note at the end of the report. A note explaining that the mine where the fossil had been extracted collapsed. that the accident killed 13 workers, that the mine was closed, that the source of the material was sealed under miles of earth, and that the project was abandoned because there were no more fossils, because there was no more hope of replicating the success, because the research had become a symbol of death instead of cure. Arthur Sterling never published the report, never sent it to scientific journals, never told anyone, just kept it in a file and let the secret die with him. Elena holds the document, her hands shake. Not because she discovers the cure worked, but because she discovers who the child was. There is a name in the report, a name written in the same precise handwriting. Subject, Philip. Age 8. Final result, hearing completely restored. Philip. Elena can pronounce the name in her thoughts. Philip was her grandfather. He was her grandmother's brother. He was the man who grew up hearing, who worked as an engineer, who had children who could hear, who died at 70 without knowing he had been the first in the family to be cured by a rich man who then chose to keep the secret. The deafness Leo has is genetic. The deafness Elena carries is genetic. The deafness Elena's whole family has is genetic. And Vincent's grandfather had cured it once, had proven it could be cured, and then had let the knowledge die, had let future generations suffer while the solution was buried in papers he hid. Elena leaves the copy shop with the document, walks through the city streets in a state that isn't quite thought. Thinks of her grandfather Philip growing up with hearing. Thinks of how many opportunities he had because he could hear. Thinks of how many opportunities her grandmother would have had if she knew she could have had hearing when young. Thinks of Leo. Thinks of how Leo could have had hearing if the knowledge hadn't been buried, if the secret hadn't been kept, if a rich man had chosen kindness instead of greed. She goes to a lawyer, a human rights lawyer who works with desperate women. A lawyer who hears the story and is stunned. The lawyer calls Vincent, tells him there is a legal question involving Elena's rights regarding his grandfather's research, tells him there is a report proving Elena's family was deceived, tells him there are legal implications of long-term family negligence. Vincent replies that he wants to know more about this, wants to know how a maid knows secrets he himself didn't know about his grandfather. The lawyer sets a meeting between Vincent, Elena, and the lawyer in an office where walls can listen. Vincent enters the room. His face changes when he sees Elena. It's a change that is almost invisible. That is just a small furrowing of the brow. That is just a movement of the eyes indicating he didn't expect to see her there. They explain about the report, explain about 1958, explain about Philip, explain about Mary. And when they reach the name Mary, Vincent goes pale. Mary, he repeats. My cook when I was 10. Your cook, corrects the lawyer. Elena's great-grandmother. The mother of the boy your grandfather cured. Vincent opens his hand. It's as if he were trying to hold something he can't grasp. You mean Elena? Elena is a direct descendant of the child your grandfather cured, says the lawyer. Elena belongs to the family your grandfather promised to cure. A promise your grandfather didn't honor. A promise you are, right now, continuing not to honor. Vincent stands up, walks to the window, watches the city down below as if he could find an answer in those streets. My grandfather never told me about this, he says with a very quiet voice. Because he was afraid, answers Elena. Because people died in the mine. Because he was afraid of being held responsible. So he hid it. He hid the cure. He hid the possibility. He hid the hope. Vincent turns to Elena. His eyes have something that is almost desperation. I didn't know, he says. I swear I didn't know. But you know now, answers Elena. And you are doing the same thing he did. You are hiding. You are choosing money instead of truth. There is a silence that is absolute. It is the silence of a man understanding that his wealth isn't just wealth, that his wealth is built on silence, that his wealth is built on deaths in the mine his grandfather hid, that his wealth is built on the possibility that was buried along with those miners. Call the buyer, says Vincent suddenly. He hasn't sold it yet, the collection is still in transit. I can tell him to send it back. He pulls out his phone, makes the call, waits while the phone rings. The buyer answers. Vincent starts speaking, starts explaining, starts begging for the buyer to cancel the sale, that return the collection, that there is a family matter that needs to be resolved. And the buyer answers, and everything collapses again. It's too late, says the buyer. I sold it. The collection was resold to a biotechnology lab in Switzerland. They are receiving the material tomorrow, and in 48 hours they will begin the analysis involving sample destruction. Vincent feels the floor disappear. "You can't sell," he screams. "You can't destroy that." "Yes, I can," answers the buyer. "It is my property. Or it was. Now it is theirs. The analysis will reveal exactly what that fossil is. And when they know, they'll want more specimens. They'll want to study more. They'll want to understand the piezoelectricity at a molecular level." And then the buyer says one thing that changes everything again. "You know, Vincent, the lab in Switzerland is one of the best in the world in biotech. When they discover this fossil can be used to restore hearing, they will publish, they will patent, they will revolutionize deafness treatment. And your grandfather will be forgotten. Your family will be forgotten. And a Swiss company will win the awards and the recognition." The buyer pauses. "Unless, of course, you have an interest in ensuring your grandfather's story is told. Unless you have an interest in being part of the right history, instead of being forgotten as the one who let it all slip away." Vincent hangs up the call, sits down, puts his head in his hands. Elena watches a man who is, finally, human. He is a man understanding the weight of what he inherited. He is a man seeing that wealth isn't enough. That wealth without meaning is just a glass prison. 48 hours, says the lawyer. You have 48 hours to try to recover the fossil before it is destroyed. 48 hours to tell a story that has been waiting 66 years to be told. 48 hours to do the right thing when the right thing is thousands of miles away. 48 hours before a Swiss lab discovers something Vincent's grandfather discovered almost 7 decades ago. Vincent stands up, walks to the window, watches the city again. But this time, his expression has changed. This time there is something in his eyes that is almost determination. "I'm going to make some calls," he says. "I'm going to see what I can do." But there is one thing everyone in the room understands. There is one thing that is clear as day. There is one thing that is inevitable. Time is running out. And not even a rich man can stop time. What he can do is try desperately to recover what he let slip away. What he can do is try to transform greed into redemption. But time, relentless time, is counting down. And in 48 hours, the truth his grandfather buried will be unearthed not by him, but by strangers who will use it to create wealth for themselves. The irony is devastating. The irony is that his greed is about to cost more than simply gold. It's going to cost the history of his own family. The 48 hours pass like days lasting weeks. Vincent doesn't sleep, makes calls, uses connections accumulated over a life of business and greed, uses money as if it were paper, uses influence as if it were water. At the end of this period that seems infinite, he succeeds. Succeeds in locating the lab in Switzerland. Succeeds in talking to the directors. Succeeds in offering a price so absurd, so completely disproportionate, that no one can refuse. 3 times what the buyer paid. That is $1 million just to have access to a stone that, until a few days ago, was worth only a few thousand. It is a payment that almost breaks one of his businesses. It is a transfer that leaves one of his real estate investments hanging like an anchor. It is a cost forcing him to sell properties. It is the price he pays not to let his grandfather's story be appropriated by strangers. The fossil arrives back in the US in a small box, well inside a bigger box, well inside a transport document costing almost as much as the fossil. Vincent receives it personally, holds the wooden box, the same box that left the mansion, the same box that almost disappeared forever, puts it in his office and sits in front of it for hours, not like a man who won, but like a man who understood what he was losing. Elena is summoned for a meeting, not an aggressive meeting. It is a meeting in an office smelling of expensive leather and air conditioning. It is a meeting where Vincent offers something that isn't forgiveness, because forgiveness is for crimes. It is something bigger than that. It is recognition. He offers to fund a research project at a top American university. A project that will study the fossil, that will replicate his grandfather's work, that will possibly create a synthesized form of the material that could be used in modern implants. Elena and Leo will be the primary beneficiaries. Leo will be the test patient. Elena will be a consultant on the project with adequate compensation, not just adequate. She will be well paid, will be respected, and the fossil will not be destroyed. It will be studied, will be preserved, will be the centerpiece of a new wing of a public museum Vincent will fund. A wing dedicated to Arthur Sterling and his forgotten work. It isn't a beautiful gesture. It is a gesture clearing Vincent's reputation. It is a gesture turning his grandfather's story into a success story instead of a failure story. It is a gesture aligning greed with kindness, in a way they can no longer be distinguished from one another. But it is, nonetheless, a gesture that changes everything. The project begins at a federal university. There is a lab dedicated to piezoelectricity research. There are scientists who never heard of Vincent's grandfather's work, but are now obsessed with it. There is a whole team reconstructing the theory of 1958 with the technology of 2026. And there is Leo. Leo undergoes a series of tests before anything is implanted, is examined by ENTs, is evaluated by biomedical engineers, is heard literally, despite his deafness. The first prototype isn't the original fossil. The original fossil is too sacred, too valuable, to be implanted in a human body. The first prototype is a synthesized material, created in a lab, mimicking the piezoelectric structure of the original fossil. It is placed in Leo's inner ear through a procedure taking 3 hours. The results aren't immediate. There is no cinematic moment where the boy opens his eyes and suddenly can hear an orchestra. There is no instant of revelation where everything changes in a second. There is, instead, a process. In the first week, Leo starts perceiving vibrations. Vibrations his brain had never processed before. Vibrations that are, technically, sound, but his brain doesn't yet understand as sound. In the second week, he starts associating vibrations with moments. Starts turning his head when certain vibration patterns occur. Starts practicing listening with a machine that is part implant, part training, part sheer willpower. In the third month, he can identify his mother's voice, can distinguish his mother's voice from other voices, can, when Elena speaks, turn to her not because he sees her, but because he can hear she is there. Elena cries when she manages to hear her son whisper her name. He doesn't whisper perfectly, pronounces it with a strange accent, like someone learning a language. But it is her name. It is a sound coming out of Leo's mouth that has meaning. Mom. It is just a word, but it is a word Elena waited 10 years to hear. The months that follow are of slow and steady progress. Leo learns to interpret the sounds his implant processes, learns that different vibrations mean different things, learns to speak more clearly because now he can hear his own voice. It isn't a magic cure. It isn't a miracle. It is science applied with patience. It is technology serving humanity. It is a boy learning inch by inch to hear a world that was always there. A year later, the museum opens. A whole wing dedicated to Arthur Sterling, dedicated to the work he did, dedicated to the secret he kept, dedicated to the cure he offered and then buried. The wooden box is in a special glass case. The bluish fossil is illuminated by a light making it shine as if it still contained all the history it carries. There are plaques explaining the work. There are reproduced documents. There is the story of Mary and her son Philip. There is the story of everything that was forgotten. And there is Elena. Elena is the assistant curator of the collection. She doesn't just work at the museum. She is the voice of the collection. She is the one explaining to deaf children what the blue fossil that listens is. She is the one telling the story of a geologist who cared more about secrets than lives. She is the restitution of everything that was denied. At the museum opening, Vincent appears not as the owner, but as a man who understood something about himself he didn't want to know. Appears older than he should be. Appears as someone who paid a price that isn't just financial. Watches Elena explaining to a group of deaf children about the fossil. Watches as she points to the glass. Watches as she talks about the watch. Watches as she talks about a grandfather who worked in silence and left his work in silence. And watches Leo next to his mother. Leo is using the cochlear implant, not the original fossil. It is a modern version, synthetic, but derived from the original fossil structure. It is science. It is technology. It is the right thing done for the wrong reason, by a man who only did the right thing because he was afraid of losing his reputation. Leo sees Vincent watching. There is a moment where their eyes meet. There is a moment where a child who can now hear recognizes a man who would prefer never to have been recognized. Leo nods. It is a shy nod. It is a nod that isn't quite forgiveness, because Leo is a child, and children don't understand forgiveness. It is just an acknowledgement that someone who hurt him also did something that saved him. Vincent nods back, and there is a knot in his throat he cannot untie. It is revolting to see a man carry the weight of his own mistakes, isn't it? To see that reparation comes not through vengeance but through recognition. To see that justice is slow, bureaucratic, and often arrives late. If you also believe that stories like this, stories of people paying the price for their mistakes and trying to do better, deserve to be told. Hit that like button right now to support all those who believe it is possible to change. The lab continues its work, continues studying the original fossil, continues replicating the structure, continues improving the implant Leo uses. There is hope that, in a few years, the procedure will become viable for hundreds of deaf children. It isn't a miracle. It is science. It is patience. It is the slow and deliberate application of knowledge to the service of humanity. Elena spends every day at the museum, spends it telling stories, spends it explaining the history of Arthur Sterling and his work, spends it honoring the memory of her grandfather Philip, spends it making visible what had been invisible for so long. She earns money now, not wealth, but enough money. Money allowing her to rent an apartment, allowing Leo to go to a regular school, allowing her to look in the mirror and see a woman who stopped being invisible. And Leo goes to school, hears the teacher, raises his hand when he knows the answer, makes friends who can talk to him through sounds and not just gestures, grows up knowing there is a part of him that is historic, that there is a fossil bearing his name, that there is a truth that was buried and he helped unearth. Vincent continues with his businesses, continues being rich, continues being powerful, but continues also visiting the museum occasionally, visiting not to be seen, but to be near the history he built and destroyed, and then rebuilt. In those quiet moments, when he is standing before the glass containing the bluish fossil, there is something in his eyes that is almost remorse, almost but not completely, because remorse is a luxury rich men rarely can afford. He has instead something closer to understanding that money can't buy everything, understanding that there are things that, once destroyed, cannot be completely restored, understanding that he lives in a world where his wealth is not enough to erase his past. It is the most fitting punishment for a man like Vincent, not prison, not the loss of money because he still has plenty. It is the constant understanding that he almost destroyed something precious and that only by luck, timing, and desperation managed to save it. This story taught us that justice is not vendetta, that reparation is more important than punishment, that science, when applied with patience, can return to the world things time and greed tried to take away, that a fossil 66 years old can keep changing lives if we give it the chance. If you like stories about redemption, about the possibility of change, about how the truth always finds a way back, subscribe to the channel to become part of our family. Because it is these stories that remind us it is possible to fix what was broken, even if the fix takes a lifetime to be complete.